I'm delighted to welcome today Hannah Williams, who is Head of Private Client at M&M Solicitors. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Elaine.
Most welcome. It's lovely when I can speak particularly to women in legal profession, because at one time when I was in it many years ago, there were hardly any of us, and now it's I think it's about 50%, isn't it? 50-50, according to some figures I looked at recently.
Yeah, well, I think the Solicitors Regulation Authority recently said that 60% of solicitors are women now. However, that percentage doesn't translate to higher up. So partners and law firm owners still around only kind of 30% women. So there's definitely a lot of women in the legal profession, but where that's translating to roles and their specialism is still a work in progress.
Why do you think that is?
That's a very good question. It's difficult, isn't it, when you're looking at these situations? There's lots of factors to consider. Certainly, in terms of there being 60% of women now, I know that when I studied years ago at university, so I did my postgraduate in 2004 to 2005, and there were significantly more women. So a lot of women were entering the sector, but in my experience, the roles, the trainee positions at big law firms weren't necessarily representing that there were that many women entering the profession. So actually, although people were training in law, actually then the jobs going forward and actually qualifying as a solicitor, I couldn't tell you what the proportions were, but certainly there seemed to still be a lot of men, considering that there wasn't a university. So you've got that. Maybe women decide, some women decided not to pursue the role. I think, unfortunately, there's still the perception and reality that women bear more of the looking after children. I think lockdown and COVID showed us that women tended to be the ones that had to give up their role to take on more childcare obligations during lockdown. And as a result, in some ways you could say understandably, if women take maternity leave and breaks from that, then men move forward in their career. But I'm of the opinion that clearly we need to help women return to law, and to help women overcome obstacles when they are feeling like the person that's taking on more of the childcare obligations, that doesn't actually impact their progression in their career. And I suspect that taking that break for children or other reasons will be the reason why women then fall behind in terms of seniority.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you can't change biology. Well, actually, some people are these days, but that's another conversation. As you were talking then, I was just reflecting on when I did my MBA in legal practice at Nottingham Law School. There were it was the world's first MBA and of its kind in legal practice, and I believe I'm right in saying there were 38 of us from all over the world, and there were only, I can only think now, thinking back, 4 women. And
oh, wow.
That was quite remarkable. Now they don't do that course anymore. It was too difficult, which was quite interesting. They gradually, diluted it. So you mentioned returners, Hannah. So you are a returner. Talk us through what happened to you. Why have you returned? Why did you leave? What was your story?
Okay, it's a good question, because I think a lot of women return to law after having children, which I have done, but I'd actually left far before that as well. So my background is, funny enough, I'm from Nottingham myself, but I came to Cardiff University as a student, did my law degree and postgrad in Cardiff, and then my training contract, early career in Cardiff as well, and have remained here. So I worked at some of the biggest name firms in Cardiff and at a national firm once I qualified. At the time that I qualified in 2008, we were facing a credit crunch. The kind of roles that I was hoping for in non-contentious areas were very, very limited. And because I had done a fair bit of litigation as part of my training contract and working as a paralegal, I was offered, you know, two roles actually, one at a Bristol firm and one at a national firm in Cardiff in litigation, and it was quite hard to turn that down in the climate, but really it wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be litigious particularly. Preferred non-contentious work. So ultimately I think it was affecting my mental health and well-being. It wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my career, and at the time there wasn't really many options within the legal industry. There wasn't the legal tech options as there are now. There weren't so many in-house positions, although that was something I did look at. There wasn't as many branding or awareness and diversity inclusion roles. It was quite a narrow progression at the time, and as a result I didn't feel that was the progression that I wanted for my career, and decided to leave. I'd always had a passion for singing and acting, and actually my first paid job was teaching drama, and because I was actually trained by the current chief examiner of LAMDA, Linda McCrow. So I decided to be completely radical and leave law, set up my own business in the arts. And that's what I did successfully for a decade. And then obviously COVID hit, and that has completely changed the landscape of so many industries. The arts in particular are very heavily affected and impacted by the lockdowns and funding. And ultimately at that point I was reassessing the whole situation, having a young child at the time, and decided to look, you know, looking at law again and thinking, well, why did I leave? Has any of that changed? And I looked at it and felt that it had. I felt that health and wellbeing was considered more. There were more options. There was certainly more self-employed, consulting, employed options. I had more confidence having run my own business, and that actually that now, particularly with COVID and the impact on private client, people being aware that they needed wills, unfortunately the excess deaths and therefore administration of estate and probate that needed doing. And I felt, well, that's what I really enjoy doing as a trainee and in my early career. So that's the right time to come back with all the extra experience I had that I genuinely don't think I would have had if I'd stayed in a law firm. You know, I have done everything that's needed to run a business and recruit and supervise people, and thinking about the holistic moving forward of a business, and I've been able to bring that back with me, which has really meant that I am quite excited about coming back.
So when did you come back, Hannah?
So it was last year. So my little boy was starting school and nursery at that point. So I felt that was a good time to be able to take on a part-time role. And then the current position I'm in, I started in January this year, and went up to 30 hours a week over 4 days.
Excellent. So do you feel you've got a good life balance now with your family, your career? Because we all need to have a sense of purpose, don't we? And so many mums, stay-at-home mums I've spoken to, they're just kind of floundering around. They don't seem to have a purpose. And especially once the children start going to school, and, you know, what do they do during the day and so on. We need to keep ourselves, you know, in good mind and spirit. So how is that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Keeping, as you said, a really good balance. I personally found it great coming back and using the kind of different elements of me. The good thing to come out of lockdown has been the advancement in using things like Zoom, meeting people remotely. You know, I deal with clients worldwide now, which you know, 10 years ago, you wouldn't really have attempted with the technology and available, because even if you knew how to do it, did anyone else know how to do it or feel confident with it? The rise in hybrid working has been absolutely fantastic. So I have a mix where I do half of my time in the office and half of my time at home, which I genuinely think wouldn't have been available to me in my early career. But now it certainly is becoming more the norm and acceptable, and everyone understands that, and therefore it hasn't been a bar. In fact, it's been a real positive.
Brilliant. That I just had a mental flashback then when I had my son 28 years ago. Goodness me. I was head of a department in a big city law firm, and it was extremely unusual for home working. And
Yeah.
I had negotiated with them. I had a, what do you call that thing? Cesarean. I had a cesarean. So I was training, I was delivering some training literally a day before I went in to have my cesarean. So I was proper work full on.
Yeah.
Went off, had my cesarean. And then within 10 weeks of having Andrew, I was at my desk at home, and
Yeah.
I was doing work. And, you know, it was in the days of dial-up networking. It was, the computer was like a huge, great big set of bricks. You know, it was just incredible when I look back now. And it's a relatively short period of time. So I think the current climate that we've got has done so much to help with women in particular, but everybody as well, because people, you know, assume that women have the mental health things, but the men, you know, they have to be stiff upper lip, you know, British stiff upper lip, get on with it, put up, shut up, and, you know, and off you go sort of thing. And I think we've got a much kinder, respectful environment now, but it still brings challenges. So what are the challenges that you find day to day with your balancing act, with being a mum, being a partner, wife, whatever, being a, you know, head of private client? You know, that's not a small role, head of department.
So yeah, it's a very good question. In terms of balancing things, like you, funnily enough, when I was self-employed, I was still didn't really stop. And my son was 6 weeks old at the backstage at the Millennium Centre in Cardiff, whilst I produced a show. So I'm used to not really stopping. And it's a difficult question, isn't it? Because I think everybody is different. I wouldn't want to project anything onto someone else, because I think sometimes it can feel like a burden if that's not the way that you work. For some people, they prefer working in the mornings. Some people prefer working late at night. Some people prefer working at home. Some people prefer working in the office. But for me, the balance has been found by the hybrid working. It's been found in having a really supportive family, thankfully having the school has some great activities and provision. You know, our school offers a breakfast club at 8 a.m, which is actually still not early enough for me on the days I go into work. My husband has to do drop off on those days because of traffic on my commute. And then there's after school clubs, and then I have family. My in-laws live locally and can help out with after school one of the days of the week, which I appreciate not everyone has that. And I think that is, I remember hearing a woman's hour session where they mentioned about the kind of burden of responsibility. There was a phrase about, I know exactly how much cheese there is in the fridge. And I was like, that's such a good example of when you try and list everything that you need to do, sometimes it can be a bit much. But it's, as you know, not just as a woman, maybe men as well, but you just do know everything that's going on, and you've got that burden of responsibility, and not letting that overwhelm you, but making sure that there are techniques or methods that can help you, such as the childcare, such as asking for hybrid or remote working. which I appreciate there are some industries and sectors that that's not possible for, but thankfully in my case it has been.
Brilliant, brilliant. It sounds as though you've got everything organised. I also credit my husband of the day with the support, and also my daughter, who was 12 at the time when I had Andrew, and between us we all worked out how we were going to manage and cope, because that's when I did my MBA as well. I just had Andrew, and I embarked upon that when he was 4 months old and Charlotte was just 12, so everybody thought I was mad. But it's we're all different, as you said before, and we can't project, we can't assume, we can't make judgments on everybody else. You also mentioned contentious and non-contentious work, and I find in the work that I do with the disc behavioural profiling, very often we have the wrong types of people in the wrong roles doing the wrong thing, and then it's inevitable that there's mental health problems, there's burnout, there's all this stuff.
Absolutely. If you're not a contentious person, then having to face that every day. Some people thrive on it. Some people absolutely love litigation and resolving things for their clients. And I work in a firm that's really highly rated, top tier firm for crime in Wales. And the department that does that, they all relish that. It's not something that I personally think would perhaps be my forte. I am, much prefer working with clients. Obviously, I don't prefer that they're grieving or vulnerable, but I like being able to offer that empathetic ear, having, a chat with someone. Some of my clients come in to see me just something to do sometimes. I think, get out the house if they've been bereaved, particularly lost a partner, and then they're on their own, and I love that, whereas there's some people who are perhaps introverted, don't like talking to people, and this would be the worst job for them, because it would having to speak to people all the time would put some people off. And I think that's such a good point about knowing your strengths or what you thrive on, and pursuing that, which, as I said, was a big reason why ultimately I left law initially, because I couldn't see that I could do that at the time, just with the climate at the time.
Timing is everything, isn't it? There's a saying that when the teacher, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and build it and they will come. There's all these phrases that sometimes things are ahead of their time, or we're ahead of our time, or whatever it is, and when everything kind of all comes together, people go, oh, that's a coincidence. Well, in my world, it's because of all maybe the preparation that you've done, the awareness. And you mentioned about the fact that you'd run a business and going back into law. That's exactly how I blagged my way into the MBA course, because I had never, I hadn't been in law long enough. I didn't have a first degree. I didn't even have an A-level. And yeah, I'd run a very successful, almost not quite multi-million-pound turnover business way back. So the professor said to me, exactly kind of what you've said, because you've sort of had a life, you're bringing that experience, the confidence, the wherewithal. And I ended up lecturing on 2 of the modules in the program, but it's based upon my experience. So your firm is so lucky to have you. I hope they realise that, because of the life that you'd had before, or in between, you're returning. And I understand you're up for an award, best returner or something. Tell us about that.
Yes, so that was a really lovely surprise, and genuinely, when people say it's just nice to be nominated, genuinely is just really nice to be nominated, because I was nominated by somebody that I've met through LinkedIn. I've made so many connections in the last year on LinkedIn. It's been quite amazing. So I was nominated by someone that I knew, and then I also was nominated by someone anonymously, so I don't know who that was. But the fact that anyone would even consider me for a category of award, personally, and not obviously the firm I'm at is award winning, but to be named for what I've done is is really very humbling and a privilege, and I could ramble on about it too much, but it really touched me to be nominated for that.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? Lovely to be acknowledged. How do you think virtual working has taken off generally? Because there's an awful lot of people I come across now who are independent lawyers, and they are linked with an association of some kind. There seems to be these lots of virtual firms. How do you think that relates to clients versus working in a big firm from an employment perspective?
So from employment perspective, so funny enough, when I was looking for my current role and interviewing, I had 4 job offers, and they were all so different, and it just showed how much the legal profession has moved on. Because when I was in my early career, you were employed and you went in as a junior essentially, and you'd work your way up, and there was very clear firm progression, and there's lots of firms that are still like that, and that's certainly one way of doing things. Now, talking about you saying about your MBA, it's great to see there's different ways of qualifying as a solicitor now as well. There's more work experience routes, because there's some people that would be excellent solicitors, but the prospect of an exam just really scares them. So it's nice that there's, and certainly as well, because of how expensive the routes are, it's great there's options for people to do the job and see if it's for them first as well. So from an employment point of view, I know from me personally, the job offers I got range from purely self-employed, and taking home a percentage of what I build, and then you'd give the other percentage would go towards the practice. What a role that was employed salary, but then on commission, so a lower salary and then commission based on your fees, and then up to the more traditional employed. So the fact that there are these options, I think is great, because I was self-employed for a long time, and there's a lot of benefits to that, and for many years that really suited me. But as we know, well, as anyone who's self-employed probably realizes, when COVID happened and the lockdown happened, there was a big difference between being employed and self-employed, and whether people got the self-employment grants. So it's definitely, there definitely is a big difference between being employed and self-employed, and it's not for everyone. And I, again, wouldn't want to kind of recommend anything either way. It depends on your circumstances. There's been times where I think I've really benefited from being self-employed, and other times where the peace of mind of being employed, even if you perhaps could have earned more by being self-employed, was better for my health and well-being. I hope that answers your question. Was that what?
Yes, yeah, that's great. Thank you. You mentioned that you do now four days, 30 hours over 4 days, and that's an interesting approach as well. That's another one of the hybrid kind of things, I presume, that you've negotiated that directly yourself with your firm, M&M. I have always been against time recording. Whoever invented time recording, I think, wants horsewhipping, because in my experience over the years, I've seen so many people that have been there in the office but have actually done nothing, and the time recording piece obviously flows through into bills. And I think there's more of a movement now to go towards per matter rather than per hours, but I think there needs to be a hybrid there as well. How do you reconcile that piece?
Yeah, definitely a hybrid. This is the first firm I've worked at where I haven't had to time record every unit of my day and account for it. I've always had to previously, and I respect that. I currently, with the work that I do, there's a lot of fixed fee work, fixed fee options, and I think clients coming in do really like to know what they're going to pay. I do have matters when I'm dealing with estate administration where I do need to do it on a hours work basis, particularly because I've had some absolutely fantastic experiences, but certainly some of the matters I've had in the last year have been very complicated, and there's been all sorts popped up, including unknown previously children, etc. And of course you couldn't have accounted for that at the start, and even if you gave a fixed fee estimate, then telling the clients all the other things that could pop up that would cost money, it is incredibly hard to do. So I think there are some circumstances and where I think the time you spent on it is appropriate. But then having said that, I am always open to new ideas and new ways of doing things, because I don't believe that just because time recording is the way that the legal industry has always done it means that it's what's best for going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to hear you say that clients can drop in and just, if they have the shopping, it's not the sort of image that one would have from a law firm, but that means that you are accessible as well as your firm, which is great to hear.
Yeah, I would like to think that I'm really accessible, and I've had clients, depending on, I've got some young clients at the moment who WhatsApp me, and then I have clients obviously that I speak to on Zoom and from abroad, and I like to think that they know that whenever they contact me that they will always have my time and attention, and I genuinely love interacting with people. So I'd like to think that certainly does not make me unique as a solicitor. I know there's lots of other people out there like that, but sadly I think you're right that the traditional image of solicitor would be standoffish and, oh, can I go and speak to them today? And I know that's not true of many of the practitioners now.
Okay, wonderful. What advice would you give to anybody considering going into the law, regardless of their age?
That's a really good question. So my advice would be really look at the different avenues now. Personally, I think that the best way, and at the moment, a lot of firms do look for experience. So getting experience in a law firm in a legal assistant or paralegal role is good opportunity for you. But also to see, do I like this? Is this what I imagined it to be? Because of course qualifying can be very expensive, whichever route you take, and you are also more likely to have a firm sponsor you or pay for your qualification if they're impressed with you and your work. So I would say that's a really good start. And I would definitely say don't let age put you off. I feel a bit of a weird, in a weird position where on paper, in terms of my post-qualification experience, I could still be classed as a junior lawyer, but yet I know that I've got the more experience behind me, and obviously I'm a bit older than some junior lawyers coming in. So I feel like I kind of have that experience of being the young qualified solicitor who went straight through from uni, and I qualified before I was 25. But then I've also got that feeling like a newbie at almost 40. And I just think if that's what you want to do, go for it. I read this year someone say, if you're worried about starting something because you'll be X age when you finish, you're going to be X age in that many years' time anyway. But do you want to be that age and having qualified or completed or achieved what you want to achieve, or be that age and you never went for it? And I think that's really good advice, because if not now, then when?
Brilliant. Any last words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Well, I really want to thank you for having me today, and because I don't think I'm that wise, but it's a really nice opportunity to get to speak to people, and I hope that I think I represent that normal person, mum or not, that is just getting back out there in their career, taking steps, pushing doors and forging new opportunities, you know, not yet got all the accolades behind them, and not yet at that point where that, you know, I'm intimidating in any way, shape or form, but just want to come on and chat about my experience in case it does resonate with anyone out there, and say, yeah, you don't have to have it all sorted, and you might have had all sorts of different experiences, and your CV might be a big hodgepodge, and people look at it and go, well, hang on a second, you were doing dancing around with children at one point, and then now you want to go into the court. That, you know, it really doesn't matter. I think any experience is valid, and just really pursue what it is that you want to do.
Brilliant advice, thank you. Hannah Williams, Head of Private Clients at M&M Solicitors. I bet you never thought you'd have that accolade before 40 when you qualified. No,
I don't know what I was expecting, but certainly a few years ago, if you'd said I was even coming back into law, I would have queried it. So I'm just really grateful for being given the opportunity. And I have to say, when you said that the firm are lucky to have me, I do also want to say that any employer out there that takes a risk on someone that does have a bit of an unusual CV, it is a risk, and I do think that should be commended. And I would, even if today people listened, and as an employer themselves and as a recruiter themselves, it made them think about that unusual candidate, then that would be excellent, because I think there's lots of people out there who've got a lot to offer, and are worried about changing careers or changing paths, when actually they could be the fresh breath of air that industry needs. Absolutely, that's a really good point, and that's how I ended up doing an MBA, because I've never been a solicitor. It's been in management, where my skills lie, and my employer at the time took a chance on me and funded the MBA, and it's a two-way street, isn't it? You know, we respect the help and support we're given, but equally we work hard to repay by way of thanks and so on and so forth. So thank you, Hannah. Lovely speaking with you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.